All right, we're going to get started. So this is the start of the third session, and we have a real treat today. We have JP Ricciardi. JP Ricciardi is currently special assistant to the New York Mets general manager after having been an analyst for the ESPN show Baseball Tonight. Prior to ESPN, JP was the general manager of the Toronto Blue Jays from 2002 to 2010. In addition to front office positions, he's also been a player and a coach. So please give a big round of applause for JP Ricciardi.
Thank you. It's really exciting for me to be here, and I think standing outside and meeting some of the people that are in this room and being able to talk baseball, I think that's the one thing we all share here is a love for the game, and I appreciate your passion in whatever direction it's in. I'm not here to stand up here today and tell you that I'm a flat-out stat guy. I'm more of a baseball guy, but I really, really enjoy the banter back and forth and the conversations in regards to how we go about coming to conclusions and how much we love the game. And can I get a show of hands? How many people are in this room that did some of the posters out there? Could you raise your hand if you did one? Yeah, you guys did a great job, really good job. You guys deserve a round of applause. Obviously, my favorite was Ben Balmer, who works with us with the Mets, so I'll keep my... No, you guys did a great job. Before becoming the GM of the Blue Jays, I'm sure most of the people in this room had no idea who I was or what I did. With the recent release of the movie Moneyball, and I think with the book done in 2002 by Michael Lewis, I think most people have an understanding, or maybe a misunderstanding of who I am or what I'm about. I would say that some people have a warped perception of who I am, and maybe I can clear some of that up a little bit today. I've been described as a Moneyball guy, a new age thinker, so to speak, a stats geek, a cutting edge computer guru. And, some of those are true, but most of them make me laugh. I've been in baseball for 32 years. I was a player, I was a coach, I was a manager, I was a scout. I rose as high as a general manager. I've done almost everything you can do from a baseball standpoint. And my background, like I stated earlier, is in scouting and player development. So anytime that I'm involved with any type of player acquisition, in any way, shape, and form, my scouting instincts are the first things that kick in. What I have learned and what has become very important to me is any type of statistical analysis on a player, his track record, what type of player he is, and any information that we can get. But I think it's important to let you know that from my end, scouting is what really makes me feel good about making a decision on a player. And that's where my strength comes from. And I think a lot of people that are in the game today that don't have that field background, their strength comes from the numbers. And that should be how they look at players. So anytime I've been involved in any type of acquiring a player in any type of way, my scouting instincts, and that's where my DNA is, that kicks in. So that takes preference for me. As most of you know in this room, that the stats have had an amazing, amazing evolution over the past 10 years. Whatever it's attributed to, whether it's the Moneyball, whether it's Theo Epstein, guys of that ilk becoming general managers, and I think it's great. I think it's absolutely great because no longer do we have the days where a guy walks up and says, "That guy looks good in a uniform. We're going to sign him." And I think it's great because it makes people think, and it's really changed the industry in a lot of ways. I've always tried to combine statistical analysis with the evaluation of a player and tried to tie in some common sense in any type of move that you're involved with when acquiring players. Unfortunately, sometimes we make mistakes, and usually the stat people aren't afraid to point out when you make those mistakes. But I think you could say it on both sides. The numbers really give you maybe a sense of comfort when you're going after a player, but ultimately those numbers don't tell you about the individual, Adam Dunn, perfect example. Great player, good player, has had a great career. He's having a terrible year in Chicago. You know, they give him a 4-year deal based on all the numbers and all the things he's done in the past. The guy's just having a bad year. Were the numbers people wrong? Absolutely not. It's just he's a human being and he's having a bad year. And I think he'll bounce back. But it's just, you know, both ways. We've both so-called parties have made mistakes basing things just on one thing or another. You know, when I was asked to come here and speak, I was sitting there saying, you know, most of the people in this room are a lot smarter than me. And, you know, what would I be able to talk to them about that would really maybe catch their interest and say, you know, I can understand why that decision was made or what went into making that decision. So instead of me sitting here and boring you with WHIP and VORP and replacement over value, what I thought I would do today was I thought I would share with you some of my own personal decisions and use them as a case study, so to speak. And what I thought was, this is all about acquiring players and how the statistical information is used to go into those decisions. Now, having sat in the GM's chair for 8 years, having spent 16 years in Oakland, and having a lot of say in that front office, both with Sandy Alderson and with Billy Bean, I think there's no substitute for life experiences. So while the numbers may be able to tell you one thing, I think the real life experience and why you came to those conclusions may shed some light on how the other half does some thinking. There's several ways to acquire players, and I've got 10 here, and if I'm missing one or two, I apologize. You can draft a player. You can sign a player as a non-drafted player. There's a 6-year free agent. There's a major league free agent. There's a designated for assignment player, a release player, a waiver claim player, a non-tendered player, a Rule 5 player, and trade for a player. Now, once again, I might be missing one or two. If I do, I apologize. And I'd like to share with you how we have gone through and will continue to go through looking at certain players. And I thought by using specific players, it may bring the stories to a little bit of light. Drafted players. We drafted Ricky Romero in 2005 for the Toronto Blue Jays, and it was a controversial pick at the time because we passed over Troy Tulowitzki, who we really, really liked. We had a kid named Aaron Hill playing shortstop for us who went on to become an all-star. And we looked at it as if we want to get pitching in the American League East to try to compete with the Red Sox and the Yankees, which we could not dollar for dollar match, we were going to have to develop pitching. So when we went out that year and we knew we had a high pick, we wanted to concentrate on an advanced college pitcher, and Ricky Romero fit that role. College kid at Cal State Fullerton, which is one of the best programs in the country. He had had success at every level he had pitched at, both in college and in the summer, Team USA. He was a guy that when I went to see him, I fell in love with him because I thought he was a 3-pitch guy. I thought he commanded his fastball. I thought he had a great breaking ball, and I thought his best pitch was his changeup. So for us, we ran every possible number we could run at looking at him. How did he pitch in that conference? How did he pitch against the better hitters that he faced in the country? How did he pitch in the summer against some of the better teams that he faced? He pitched against Cuba. How did he pitch against Cuba, which is advanced? They're really men playing against boys. So when we drafted Ricky Romero, we based it on the fact that we thought we had a true predictor. And in scouting terms, he reminded me of Johan Santana. Well, we chose Ricky Romero in 2005, and we made the right pick. But that pick was based on the fact that we had a need. He fit that need, and his numbers and everything leading up to us making that decision, we felt comfortable that this was going to be the right guy. A couple years later, we took a catcher named JP Ricciardi, who was a catcher at the University of Tennessee. Not a great hitter for average, but had power and was a very good defensive catcher. Struck out a lot. As most of you know, catching is one of the hardest positions to find in baseball. It's a position that you need. But we thought we could get a first-round pick with power. We thought his power would play from the college level on up. Once again, he played at the University of Tennessee, a high level. The SEC is probably the best level of baseball in the amateur level for a college player. His Team USA numbers. and we thought that he would be a big power guy and drive and runs and probably be a low batting average guy, but end up being a plus defender. Well, he's probably not close to being a plus defender yet, but he is a big power guy. He's got 25 home runs and 80 RBIs in his rookie year. So those two number one picks worked out for us. And the reason I bring up the draft is, in today's game, the draft is very important. The draft in baseball is almost becoming like the draft in the NFL. The draft where you have to hit on those number one picks because they have to be guys that come up and contribute on your major league club, and actually the sooner the better. In our case, we drafted a lot of college guys just on the fact that we thought if we got them to the big leagues quick, we could not only have value, they could help fill a need for us, but we could turn them into value, or we could turn them around and trade them later on. So those two picks became really good picks for us, and that was the example I'd like to use out of the draft. Now, the non-drafted player is a player that that goes through the draft and is not drafted for some reason. A scout didn't like him, no one thought enough of him. This, on the reverse side, is probably where the scout comes in more than the statistics. Although, if it's a college player, you'll check all his numbers. You'll check his college numbers, his summer numbers, and then obviously, you'll rely on the scout to sign him. I personally was fortunate enough to sign two non-drafted players as a scout. One, I was a GM, and both those guys ended up getting to the big leagues. One of them played 14 years in the big leagues, and I think currently holds the all-time fielding percentage for a shortstop in a season. It's Mike Bordick. And Mike Bordick was a kid out of the University of Maine that was not a very big guy, hit about 270 or 280 in college, but caught everything he was hitting him. Didn't have the greatest range for you defensive metric guys out there, but he caught everything that was hit to him. He was just a very, very solid baseball player. I signed him as a non-drafted free agent for $10,000. He went on to earn about $17 million in his career. Ended up working out pretty good. And the other kid was a little kid right down the street here in Worcester, Mass. I went to see a Legion game, and this kid came in and pitched, and I couldn't believe it when I saw him. He's about 5'5", and he's pitching for the Kansas City Royals right now. He was one of the youngest pitchers in baseball. His name was Tim Collins. And so that's a reverse side of where scouting can come into effect. And, you do run the numbers, but it's just another way you could acquire players. 6-year free agents. And this, I think, is one of the funnest areas that a front office has. These are players that are really, really undervalued. And if you do subscribe to the Moneyball theory, if you do like the movie Moneyball, if you did like the book Moneyball, which was a great book, this is where we had our most fun. These were the players that nobody wanted or nobody thought was good enough, or a team like the Red Sox or the Yankees at the time that weren't doing what they're doing now didn't really have a need for these guys because they could go out and get a major league player that was had a proven track record that the manager could look down the bench and say, okay, if I can bring that guy off the bench as opposed to Joe Blow, I'm going to feel comfortable bringing a guy with a history. So what we did in Oakland, and we continue to do in Toronto, and we continue to do it in New York, is look for players that other teams may not value. I could throw a couple names at you. Matt Stairs was a guy in Oakland that we took that played really, really well in the minor leagues. He always hit. He hit for power. Pretty good walk rate. Wasn't unbelievable, but with left-handed bat. We had seen him play in Pawtucket. Got a little bit of a time in the big leagues in Boston, but he was never going to play in Boston. He was just not going to get there. Mike Greenwell was playing left field. The Red Sox probably were in a position, and I don't blame them, to go out and spend money and get a player. So Matt Stairs was never, ever going to play. We signed Matt Stairs. He went on to hit 40 home runs for us. I think he hit close to 150 home runs in 3 or 4 years in Oakland, and he became what is today the Moneyball player. Another example I can give you is a guy named Scott Downs that we signed in Toronto. Scott was a former #1 pick. He was a failed starter in Montreal, and we had no money, and we needed a left-hander in our bullpen. So we were scraping the bottom of the barrel for anybody we thought that was left-handed that could do anything. And in Scott's case, we thought we could use him as a swingman, a guy that could possibly pitch 2 or 3 innings for you, but might ultimately become a situational left-hander. So we broke down every one of Scott Downs' starts. We broke down every one of his appearances, lefty on lefty. We broke down every one of his multiple innings, and we decided to take a chance on him because we thought that we could ultimately, with the numbers that we got off of all his pitching in the minor leagues, we thought that we could get a guy that could ultimately be that situational left-hander. Scott signed a 4-year deal last year for, I think, $5 or $6 million a year in Anaheim, and we ended up getting 4 great years from him, and he ended up we like to call guys like Scott the gift that keeps on giving, because we signed him for dirt. He played for us. It was very controllable salary. When it was time for him to make a lot of money, we obviously let him go his way, and we got a draft pick for him. So to this day, Scott Downs keeps contributing to the Blue Jays. But that's one way that we went about our 6-year free agents. Major league free agents. You know, I think if you put any GM up here, they'll tell you it's the market you do not want to be in. It's probably the biggest market of the unknown. I think Kyle Crawford is a great player, and I think Kyle Crawford's going to have a great career in Boston. But I can tell you right now, I'm sure the people that signed him are sitting there saying, can you send the real Kyle Crawford over? Because he's struggling, but he will be a good player. So anytime you delve in the free agent market, it's definitely a little bit of a leap of faith. And I think, you know, we could talk for 2 hours on this, and I'm trying to condense it as fast as I can because there's a lot of things that go into signing free agents. What does your ownership want to do? How much pressure is there from ownership to want to win? Are you close to winning? Can a guy put you over the hump? You know, one of the biggest free agents we got to sign in Toronto was A.J. Burnett. And, you know, everybody sees what's happening to A.J. Burnett in New York right now. And for us, we feel like we got the 3 best years out of A.J. Burnett. And when we looked at A.J. Burnett, our ownership came to us and said, we're going to be able to have a little bit of money next year. And we already had Halliday, we already had Markham, we already had Ted Lilly, we already had the makings of a very good staff. We thought we needed one more arm to get us over the hump in the American League, especially the American League East. So what we did was we scouted Burnett's last 13 starts of the season. We charted every possible pitch he threw. We watched every pitch he threw. We had video of every start he had. When we broke Burnett down, out of all the free agent pitchers, he was the one guy who averaged 90 miles an hour or faster on more pitches than anybody in baseball. We knew he was a strikeout guy. We knew in Toronto we had Halliday. He didn't have to be the guy. So we looked at all the numbers that we thought would be beneficial to pitching in our ballpark, and we took a chance on Burnett. We gave him a 5-year deal, $55 million, and we gave him an out the 3rd year of the contract. We gave him an out in the 3rd year of the contract because we didn't know if we were going to like him, and it was really the only way we can get him to come to Toronto. And we overspent because it's hard to get players to come to Canada. But anyway, we got Burnett, and I kind of say this with a smirk on my face because he pitched 3 years for us. It only cost us $10 million a year. He won 40 games for us, had a 3.98 ERA, pitching in the American League East, and had a strikeout an inning. So for us, the money was well worth it. And scouting him and statistically watching him and breaking him down became a major, major reason why we signed him, and it really worked out well for us. And I'm sure everybody who is out there looking at free agents is going through the same thing. What parks do they pitch in? Is he a fly ball pitcher? Is he a ground ball? And that's the stuff I didn't want to burn you guys with, bore you guys with today. But all of these are factors when you're talking about acquiring players. A player who's designated for assignment is a player that basically you have 10 days to trade. We were lucky one year. We traded for Shea Hillenbrand the year before, and Shea Hillenbrand made the All-Star team. We had a problem with him. We had to designate him for assignment, and we only had 10 days to make a trade. And usually when you designate a player for assignment, you most likely don't get anything. We ended up working out a trade with San Francisco. They had a right-handed pitcher, a guy who didn't pitch a lot for him, a kid by the name of Jeremy Accardo, who our scouts liked, but more importantly had a strikeout an inning in every possible minor league stop that he was at. We were a little scared because he was a fly ball pitcher, but we ended up getting a quality arm in kind of a desperate spot for us. Accardo went on to save 31 games for us, so it was found money. But that's another way you can move a player, designated for assignment, and how you can acquire guys. Release players, pretty simple. I mean, you release a player, anybody can pick him up and pay him the minimum. I think the Giants are happy they picked up Pat Burrell last year, helped him win a world championship. Waiver claims. Obviously, waivers are come across every day. And once again, every single player that comes across waivers, as a front office staff, you're breaking them down. You're looking at who may fit. You know, we claimed Brian Talbot one year. He was a left-hander, and everybody thought we claimed him because he was a left-hander. He was going to be a situational guy. He was horrible against left-handers. We signed him because he had a great changeup, and he was really, really good against right-handed hitters. And he ended up pitching about 4 years for us in Toronto, but he was absolutely great because he had a great changeup, and he really nullified right-handed hitters. And but we couldn't pitch him against lefties because he was god-awful. But, you know, it was a way for us to get players on the cheap. Joe Inglet, you know, not a household name, but Joe Inglet came up. He played second base, third base, the outfield for us. He could run. He put the bat on the ball. He had a 350, 360, 370 on-base percentage. You knew he'd take a walk. You knew you could hit and run with him. You knew if a manager played him, he would take a few pitches. He would let you get deep in counts. And, you know, simple guys like that fill your needs when you're looking to put a big league club together. And then another year we claimed Pete Walker on waivers, and the reason we claimed Pete Walker was because I had scouted Pete Walker the year before, and I really liked him, and he ended up winning 10 games for us. So that's just a plug for myself, to be honest with you. There's no statistical thing. One of my favorite stories, non-tendered players. Non-tendered players to me fall under the category of, it's the major league version of the 6-year free agent. When I first got to Toronto, we had absolutely no money. We operated on my 8 years in Toronto on a $70 million budget, basically. That's what the average was a year. In the first 4 years, it was at $50 million. So we had no money. And Frank Catalanato got non-tendered. And I had loved Frank Catalanato from the time we were in Oakland. We had Rule 5'd him, brought him over to camp. A Rule 5 player has to come over and make your major league team. Well, Frank Catalanato was only in Double-A, and he didn't play really well for us in camp, so we sent him back to the Tigers. But I've always liked Frank, and I kept an eye on him. Well, he became non-tendered with Texas, and we ended up signing him. And we signed him because he wasn't a great left fielder, but he could play left field. But offensively, he was everything we were trying to incorporate in Toronto at the time, and to be able to show that this is what we were going to be all about. He was a guy who took pitches. He was a guy who took a walk, and he was a guy who got on base. Not a lot of power. But we ended up signing Frank. He ended up playing 4 years in Toronto for us. And I'll tell you a funny story, and I won't mention the name, but this guy can be read on a national publication. And we were sitting in a room, and he kept saying, we need a guy with at least an 800 OPS. This guy has to have an 800 OPS. We need a left fielder with an OPS of 800. So we're sitting in the winter meetings, and I'm sitting down, and I had Bill James's book. And I looked down and I said, what if I told you guys we could get a left fielder who hits 285 to 295 a year, maybe 7 to 10 home runs, walks maybe 2 out of 10 times, has an on-base percentage of maybe 370 and an OPS of 805, 810. Would you guys sign that guy? Everybody in the room puts their hands up. I said, we got him. He's Frank Catalanato. So we had the guy everybody was looking for. Rule 5 guys, I think the Rule 5 is a fun time. And guys like Ben who work in our front office, they can tell you it's a time where you can go out and get what other organizations don't think players are going to play in the big leagues for them. I won't explain to you exactly all the rules that go into how a player is protected and not protected, but this is the same thing. It falls into the category of basically unwanted players. We got Pedro Beato this year. We looked at him as a reliever as opposed to a starter, and the guys did a great job coming up with his numbers and obviously having the ability to take a chance on him. But that's a fun time, the Rule 5, which is held at the winter meetings in December, and it's where you scan everybody's organization and you look at certain players that do not look like they're going to fit, or well, they're not protected, but they may be a left-hander on left-handed guy. It might be a shortstop who could play defense late that ultimately can become a starting shortstop for you down the road. But it's just another way of acquiring players. And every one of those players we put up on a board, and we break that player down. We look at every single number that you could possibly look at. One year we screwed up. We could have drafted Mike Napoli, and we passed on it, and he ended up being a really good player. We didn't have the space at the major league level, but we should have drafted the player anyway because we liked his power numbers. And lastly is trades. And, trades kind of, for me, fall under the category of free agents. It's not a hit or miss, but you got to really do your homework, because usually when you're trading for a player, there's a reason why he's on the trading table. And, sometimes you're getting that player, just like free agency, where his best years may have already been behind him. But once again, I think with trades, it's usually filling a need. And in most cases, the team that's trading is either looking to dump salary or, trying to just get out from under the player's contract in the sense of, we're not going to be able to carry this guy anymore, or we got a younger player who can replace him. But it's just another way you can acquire players. And once again, like I said, in all of these things, there is a statistical breakdown done that would absolutely bore you if I went through every single thing. But, I'm sure you guys are going to ask some questions about what we look at. You'll be amazed at the things that some of these kids, like I said, a lot smarter than me, come up with in looking at players. And I think, what we try to do is bring some common sense to acquiring any type of player. I thought I'd throw these examples out to you. Hopefully it gives you a little bit of understanding of what goes into, maybe acquiring some players at the major league level as opposed to maybe some things that you guys are thinking of. But I'd like to I do want to leave some questions here, so I'll open it up in a second. I just want to let you know that, the stats are very, very important, and they will continue to be important as this game keeps evolving. But the one thing you have to remember is that the game is played by humans, and it's played by people with a heartbeat. And I think that's why our game is not an exact science. And all you have to do is look at the NFL. Nobody has more access to information and players than the NFL. They can walk on a campus and interview a guy. They could put up plays and have that player react to that play right there. They could throw blitzes at the player by sitting down and having any type of classroom discussion with him and actually test his IQ. They can have a combine, take him out and throw. They have the combine where they run. The NFL screws up more than anybody. I mean, all you have to do is look at the Patriots. They got Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis is a free agent. Wes Welker is a free agent. Tom Brady went in the 6th round. Woodhead is a free agent. So the games are played by humans, and that's the one thing that I think we all have to remember. But without holding up here, I'll open up some questions.
Let's first thank JP. We're going to try to stick to the session schedule, but I do want to leave like 5 minutes for questions. So we'll basically. So we're going to need to speak into the microphone, so we'll probably run around with the mic. Scott, do you want to grab the mic and just give it to people as they're?
Just yell it out.
You said you use a lot of stats in looking at the players, and I'm sure there's a ton behind the scenes. How did the steroid era affect the stats that you look at?
You know what? That's a great question. I was just having this discussion with someone the other day. I feel bad for all the general managers that got burnt because a lot of the contracts that were done and the steroid era was in full bloom, it didn't bother those guys, it didn't affect those guys. It's the ones that once testing came in the middle of those contracts that, and I can't throw the player's name out there, but we got burnt ourselves. We had a situation where a player had a 5-year deal, and 2 of those years were great. And 3 of those years, once they started testing, we got burnt. So it was really buyer beware. And I think we all knew that something was going on, but until there was any rules in place, we just basically kept signing players. So I think, you look at power today, that's a great indicator. I mean, I was looking at the leaders the other day. I think whoever's going to lead the American League in home runs is not going to hit 50 home runs this year. And the average, I would say, power today, I would say, from a scouting standpoint, 25 home runs is what's pretty good power now, and that's what it was when I was growing up. So maybe we're coming back to that, but that's a good question. Come on, yell it out.
It's the microphone because we're recording.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Do you account for things like qualities like leadership and chemistry and clubhouse, and how do you do that?
Yeah, you know what? That's another great question. I think one of the things that's missing from any type of statistical analysis on a player is you are together 7 months out of the year. Guys get on each other's nerves. You have to have guys who they don't have to get along all the time, but they have to. There has to be an understanding of how things go in the clubhouse. There's clubhouse etiquette. There has to be a leader in there, someone that will pull someone aside and say, hey, We run balls out here. We don't jog on balls. You know, and I think, you know, and I'm not speaking for the Yankees or the Red Sox, but because they do a great job of it, but there's certain players who cannot play in Boston and cannot play in New York. And I don't care what kind of money you put in front of them, that money's not going to change. You know, they're not going to, when you got 37,000 people, and most of us are from around here, half of them are probably our friends, scream. I used to tell our team, hey, I apologize. Half these guys I probably went to school with that are screaming at you. But, you know, they're right on top. That's a different environment to play in. You have to have a certain character to play in certain places. So, yeah, a lot of that stuff is done. There's a lot of background checks done. And, you know, for myself, being in the game so long, you have a lot of connections. You'll ask guys, hey, how's so-and-so? Is he a pretty good guy? Even to the point where, what kind of tipper is he? You know, is he good to the young kids in the clubhouse, the kids who run around and clean up all the stuff? Is he good to those guys, or does he treat them bad? So that's a really good question, because there are a lot of instances where, you know, you make a knee-jerk reaction on a player and it comes back to bite you.
Here, we have time for one more.
In a front office, do you generally have your own department conducting research, like generating its own stats? Or do you use ones that are more widely available, or some combination?
I think there's so much time, and there's so many guys in there. Like with the Mets, we have a lot of guys. And I'll tell you what we did in Toronto, and this was fun for me. I would get a thought, and I would just turn to those guys and say, let me ask you something, because I was getting annoyed at one time. It seemed like every time we scored a run, we gave up a run the next inning. And, you know, you're looking for that shutdown inning. And so I asked one of our guys, I said, do me a favor. I said, go back and look in the last 5 years. How many times a run was scored and the team came back and gave up a run? Just see if it's, I want to see if it's psychological. I want to see if it's just some trend, whatever it was. So anytime you have thoughts like that, it's great to have people in the office that you can bounce things off. Now, some of them are doing some other things, but when we have great people in New York. We had guys do a study on what's the value of the college player over the high school player. How much money being spent? Is that money better utilized at the college player? So, yeah, like I said, I mean, I would bore you with some of the things, and Ben could probably answer it more than me, but for me, I like the fact that I could just throw a thought out there, and the guys would run with it, and some guys would come back and you know, they'd give you something like this, and I said, I don't need all of that, just, you know, get to the facts, but it's great. So, anyway, I know you guys are on a tight schedule. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, and good luck.
Yeah, so can we get a wireless mic?
Sure. Thank you. I'm mobile. You know how it's academics are. So where's your talk? It should be Jacobson.
There it is.
Top. First one is. Okay. I've done this before, but you just put it where you need it. Yeah.
Let me introduce you.